Well, hello there. My name is Walker Stipe, and today I'd like to talk about nerds. I'd like to talk about the Beetle people, as we will reference them today. So let's do that. So, bit of a disclaimer before we get too far. Let's just get this out in the open, bright and breezy right off the bat. Essentially, mathematics, it's only gotten so far. There's a whole lot we don't know. Psychology, there's a whole hell of a lot we don't know. However, we're trying. We as in humanity, in particular research groups and labs and clinicians and people with different conditions who are sort of the inadvertent test subjects of these things. So, slow down, cut some people some slack, and let's try and make progress despite our mediocre tools. All right. So let's start. I like philosophy, so we're going to start with a bit of etymology. Basically, how did we get to this thing called autism? Basically, it's like typically referred to as a disability, as a disorder. And why is that? It's a little surprising. Personally, I found it kind of surprising. And it seems that the reason is because of the way autism came about. Essentially, you have parents who have kids, and your kids might be really good at something, but they're not doing other normal kid stuff, and so parents, being parents, kind of freak out a bit, and potentially rightly, to get help. And so they go to the doctor, and they're like, something's wrong with my kid, and oh my god, it's autism. Well, autism basically, you got some good bits, and you got some weaknesses you got to overcome, but the kind of key is that there's some weaknesses, and people freak out, and it's okay, right? Like, we do want to help the weaknesses to bring out the strong suits. You need a bit of a mid-range. So this is a long ass video. Why are we devoting our time and energy to devote to this subject when roughly 2 to 3%, 4%, it's very fuzzy, but a very small minority of the population of humanity. This is not delineated really on race or gender. That one's a little fuzzier. But essentially, it's not the majority of people. And yet, I think it's one of the majority. It's a major subject that we really need to understand. Well, it's because of the impact that this tiny people group has on the world, and that it is incredibly disproportional to the normies or neurotypicals, which is a really fun word. So here we have kind of the examples of not necessarily autistic people, but people who are a minority and impacting a majority. So we have our good friend Ian Goodfellow right here with his delightful Noogle hat. He's a artificial intelligence researcher who came up with the idea of GANs. You may know them as deepfakes, which we did a video about that because I think it's so important. And then we have, Anonymous, or V from Vendetta, great film, and sort of Anonymous as the internet vigilantes that they are. And they've had some funny run-ins with North Korea, which is the world we live in. And, it's a small group of people who's not they ain't no big pharma or whatever joke. And then we have Wall Street Bets. And just go on the internet and check it out. As of today, GameStop is the hottest commodity. So just a quick example of sort of small groups of people who are not the majority who are having a major impact. So I would like to be more general than just a few small examples, and I'd like to talk about the majority of sort of what is going on in the world, who is sort of driving the progress of humanity. Where are we going as a species? Where are we going? Well, follow the money is a very good axiom to consider. And, here I'd like to reference a few things. One, that a lot of these are either technology companies, the biggest companies in the world. They're technology companies, or they're consumer services, which are really, if you know anything about Alibaba or Amazon, it's kind of, the reason that they're so successful is that they're converting a consumer service into a technology. Bit of fuzziness, but that's the point I'm trying to make. And then, the countries where these companies are located are essentially China and the U.S., almost exclusively. This is a delightful little graph we have. I put this graph up because it sort of makes that point a bit obvious. It's not a tautology. It's not wholly true, but disproportionately, that's having an impact. So, quick digression. Is any of this scary? No, this is all fine. See, you even got little Ian Goodfellow looking like a nice swell fellow. This is a super sick graph, which I spend some time on in a different video, so I'm using it again to demonstrate how technology is good. One aspect. So here we have in the United States of America, roughly 80-year lifespan. It's pretty good. China, almost 80 year. Japan, great job. Australia, Africa, the whole world round. But if we go back in time to the beginning of the 1900s, well, we didn't know what Africa was yet, which is pretty funny. But these numbers are not good, and this is an average, so we can consider skewing and all these things, but focus here for a second. 30-year lifespan expectancy. I mean, these numbers are horrendous. 28 years. 24-year life expectancy in India. Okay? 30 years go by. This is like middle of World War II right here. This has gone up a massive amount. So really just, screw the numbers. Look at the colors. And I ask you, what changed? Right? Obviously not all these numbers are where we'd like them to be. I'd like them all to be infinities, but for another time. What changed? Did humanity change in some fundamental way in the last 100 years? No, we have the same genetics for the most part. We have the same soul, we have the same ethics, a little fuzzy. But what we do have is medicine. What we do have is technology and a lot of food, excess food in some places. And that is that's technology, which is a good thing if we do it right. So, now let's talk about credit assignment. Who do we have to thank for the life expectancy and our new all the delights of modern living? And not just the delights and pleasantries, but the parts that really sort of make life worth living. Whether that be philosophy or religion or theology, whatever it is for you. Maybe it's cats. It should be cats. Come on. Okay. So I'd like to point out a few sort of giants, standing on the shoulders of giants, and that these guys are disproportionately have impacted the world. Tesla, he literally invented the electric motor and generator. They're actually the same thing, which is like a 99% efficiency rating, just quick aside. It's pretty cool. And then Alan Turing, godfather of the computer. Einstein figured out that time is not constant, and a whole bunch of other stuff. Nukes, nuclear power, nuclear weapons. And John Nash, who is less well known, but is the subject of one of my favorite films, A Beautiful Mind, where essentially he kind of struggles with some mental illnesses of his own, which is not a bug, but a feature of this type of brilliance, which we'll get more into in the next coming minutes. Of note, some of these guys were kind of assholes. John Nash and Alan Turing specifically. One of my favorite little tales about Alan Turing is that he, at Bletchley Park, would take his coffee mug, and he would lock it onto the radiator so no one else could use his mug. Because, all those other brilliant scientists and mathematicians really want to use your mug. So, just kind of a funny tale. So, Tesla said something that is easily one of my favorite things ever said, which is, be alone. That is the secret of invention. Be alone. That is when ideas are born. Einstein said a bunch of things, including the quote on the screen, but more importantly, he was a bit of a misogynist, ? I don't think so. I propose that he wanted things to be clear, and I could absolutely be wrong. But the other thing we have here, this little nice list, is a list he gave to his wife, which is essentially how he wanted their relationship to be structured. Now, either he's a woman hater, or he just really wanted that clarity, you know? Sounds very autistic to me. Okay, so those are some of the sort of titans of industry and science and whatever from the past. But what about modern day? Well, we have some very heavy hitters in Jack Dorsey, who I know a lot of people are very angry about. That's not the point. It's not the subject of now. He looks like Gandalf. That's what we care about. You know, the Twitter and Square fellow. Here we have Demis Hassabis, however you say that name. He's the CEO of DeepMind and doing amazing, important work there. And here we have Larry Page of the Google, or Alphabet, what have you. And, you know, I kind of just like us to take a step back and look at these people as people. And, you know, I picked a picture of Demis Hassabis as a kid with the controller because, you know, he's a gamer. And here we have Fang, you know, the sort of big five of the tech industry, which flip-flops around a bit. But these are incredibly wealthy and powerful companies that have very much so ingratiated themselves into our everyday lives. You know, our phone is almost never it's part of our existence. It's always with us. And that's great, right? You have a question, you can look it up. You need to talk to a friend or family, whatever. It's right there. But it also has some caveats which are real and to be, you know, considered and potentially worried about. So one reason to bring up these five fellows is their impact on the sort of common man. You know, let's imagine that you are a bookseller. You own a little library and you sell books. Well, Amazon ate you, right? They sell millions and millions of books amongst a few other items, but it's impossible to compete with this colossus that is this sort of new species that is Amazon in this new way of commencing commerce.
Mark, are the allegations true that you are secretly a lizard? I'm gonna have to go with no on that. I am not a lizard.
So kind of one of the points I'm attempting to sort of show via illustration is that ambivalence is a powerful tool, right? These powerful companies and individuals had a goal and they set out to achieve that goal. And what other people thought about it was never included in their equation, in their sort of thinking process to get the thing done. Well, AI is very much structured that way, algorithmically, and in the weeds. That's how it works. Where that can be, it can result in semi-aggressive behavior if you try and get in the way. This is a good thing, okay? Technology is a good thing. And why is that? Well, in part it's because of our smallness, okay? We have some delightful figures here. One in Carl Sagan, famous for the the pale blue dot, right? Kind of looking back at literally planet Earth from thousands and hundreds of thousands of miles away. And you could barely even see the Earth. And all of human existence, all of human history existed on a literal tiny rock floating in space. That's all of human existence. That's it. Which is not to demean it, but to put it in a different perspective. C.S. Lewis is a theologian, philosopher, and just all-around jolly fellow who, side note, looks exactly like John von Neumann. Like, they look indistinguishable. Okay, not important, but fun. And he said something that I think is delightful, which is, it would seem that our Lord finds our desires not too strong, but too weak. We are half-hearted creatures, fooling about with drink and sex and ambition, when infinite joy is offered us. Like an ignorant child who wants to go on making mud pies in a slum because he cannot imagine what is meant by the offer of a holiday at the sea. We are far too easily pleased. Why do I bring this up? Because, twofold. One, autistic people often get the rap of little affect, little, small emotion, and robotic. We're talking about robots as well, literally robots. And some of that is a big misunderstanding, in that what is actually sort of happening is that the emotion is even heightened, that these are more emotional, more feeling, more sensory human beings, and yet they just don't express these emotions outward. And I think that is not surprising when we see that the aims and goals of a lot of these Beetle people is that they're way higher. Like, they're way higher. They want to go to Mars. They want to solve cancer. They want to end hunger. They want to do all these sorts of things that are pretty insane, pretty surprising, and are sort of in this direction C.S. Lewis is kind of talking about, which is like, no, guys, like, look up, wake up, like the future's out there, and it's going to be way better than it is now, which is true, right? We can look back 100 years, and not only were people dying, but they also, couldn't listen to music at any point in time. It's a nice little example. I like that one. Last but not least on this slide is Pedro Dominguez, who I'd like to personally thank for writing his book, The Master Algorithm, which played a huge role in my life. We're kind of muddling around in our lives, in our sciences, when we could embrace artificial intelligence, computation, these things, which is sort of the boat to sort of go on to the infinite vistas that are reality and multiverses and stuff. Said with pictures, we need a rocket ship for truth. We need a race car for knowledge, for feeling and emotion, and these things as well. Currently we are all of humanity is sort of numb, and we're kind of dead inside. And we don't have to be, right? This is not a necessity. Death is an option, and we should get rid of it. So, technology is a part of that, and it's also got some scary bits, but it's good. Okay, this is one of the few tools that can be used for good and ill, but the good has the extreme potential to outweigh the ill. Are there scary robots? Absolutely, but we can absolutely imagine and construct some robots that will be very pleasant, such as those from the Star Wars universe, and will help us with our weaknesses, and we can help them with our strengths, and vice versa. Because it's not left, it's not right, it's forward. Yes, I ripped that from a politician who's not a piece of shit. Now, why do we care? Why is this important? Does this ever get out of the space of looking into the stars and get to our personal lives? Yes, it does. Right now. So it has been shown, research papers and empirical studies and such, that autistic people are just more logical. Being logical is kind of important. Surprise, surprise. And, making decisions on emotion is not wholly wrong, but it's worse than making decisions based on logic. Okay, so Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky were in a bromance. There's a lot of great books and stuff on that subject. Highly recommend. And Nobel Prize winning psychologists who won the Nobel Prize in economics, fascinatingly enough. And delightful book called System 1 and System 2, which is essentially putting into a single book kind of their life's work around this idea of the human mind having two kind of modes of functioning. One is System 1, which is very, it's automatic, it's fast, it's unconscious, right? So I say 2 plus 2 equals 4. I show you an angry animal and you have a sort of visceral response. You touch a hot plate and, oh! System 2 is slower. It's sort of meatier. It's more computational. I say, what's 174 times 13? Give me a second. You gotta sit down. You gotta focus and these sorts of things. And there's a cognitive load. It's hard to multitask with this kind of thinking. And that's interesting. It's interesting that is something that all of us do. That is a feature of pretty much all human existence. Joscha Bach is a scientist who talks a lot about AI, so I'm a fan. And he describes his childhood. And it's, not novel at all. It sounds very similar to a lot of these sort of nerdy kids, a lot of reading, not a whole lot of interacting with girls and people of the opposite sex. And there's a certain component of these stories, which is that nothing or very few things were intuitive. Very few things were System 1. And almost everything had to be, what's the math term? You derive. Everything sort of had to be derived for oneself, so why shouldn't you say that to somebody? Well, you say it to them and you learn from that experience, from that mistake, which is very expensive and exhausting, but in the long run is better. You become a better thinker and potentially a better person. Better person being a very fuzzy term. But all of this to say is that I'm proposing here that System 1, System 2 are great analogies for the kind of difference between an autistic person and a non-autistic person, where a non-autistic person is kind of more automatic, intuitive, and these sorts of things, and a autistic person is more System 2. They're more in the sort of, if you will, the conscious space of computation and thinking. Now that's my opinion. I have no references. That's something I'm proposing. We could be completely congenial in this conversation. It be totally, you can be a normie and that's fine. Or you could be smart and go into STEM and whatever. We could be completely non-confrontational. And we're not going to do that. I'm going to, I'm kind of proposing that no, the one is better than the other. Which is heavy. That's a lot. So here's Aldous Huxley, who is kind of, I'm ripping from him the Beetle people thing that's in his book, Brave New World. Long, delightful quote. Basically, normies are basic and unconscious cows. You're vegetables. We don't want to be vegetables. We want to be alive. We want to be conscious. We want to be thinking things. And we can do that. We can change. I propose, via my own life experiences, I've not researched this outside of the context of asking a lot of pretty normal people some pretty heavy questions, and they are smart. They totally have the capability to engage their mind, to really think. It's just that for whatever reason, they often don't. Which is something I'd like to kind of one of the goals of this show, to see if we can do that.
I want to really get you thinking tonight. That's what I want to do. I want to get you to think about different ways of thinking.
Sanity is not statistical. Really think on that. Sanity is not statistical. Basically, everyone else is fucking insane. Everyone else has lost it. An example I have used in another video, and I'll use again because I think it's just delightful. Noah, from the Abrahamic religious traditions, plural, was a fellow on planet Earth a while back, and he was the only man who was following God, the one true God, whichever that may be. This is not a theology class. We're considering this in the historical context. And everyone else alive was evil in God's eyes. So God killed them all. He flooded the earth and saved Noah. He just started over. But that's just sort of one religious example of a fellow who was statistically insane, right? Most people were one way and he was another. And according to the context of those religions, he was the only sane man. Said another way, it was not that long ago when we had slavery in a lot of the world, including the U.S., but just the world, and it was normal. It was statistically sane, and it wasn't. No. So we need to literally figure out the science of never again. Okay? I do not think that we have done that, which is something I'd like to circle around, not propose like, here's the solution, but let's really be willing to discuss these people, such as our angry cat Hitler. That'd be a nice, there's Man of the High Castle. What if Hitler had won? What if Hitler had been angry cat? I'd watch it. That was really good. So, diagnosis is quite important, right? If I think that you have a headache, but you actually have an aneurysm, that's a really big mistake. We don't understand why Hitler did what he did, and why an entire country got behind him. How do we ensure that we don't do that again? And even worse, how do we do that? We don't. We do these things again. As a quick aside, the sort of philosophy of how we define things and how we discuss things is very important. Here we have ideally a bit humorous Hitler, Bernie Sanders. Here are these things they have in common. Therefore, Bernie's a Nazi. What the fuck? No, Bernie's not a Nazi. Yes, he is a socialist, which people have opinions on, and that's totally fine. But just because there are certain components in common does not necessarily mean synonymous. Okay, so definitions are important, and we have the delightful art of Seb McKinnon here. Witch hunts are very dangerous, and we want to avoid those, and be sure that we move slowly and methodically towards truth and progress, but slowly, methodically, carefully, ideally kindly, if we can manage. Let's get into the heavy stuff. We just talked about Hitler. Isn't that the heavy stuff? No, Hitler's not the heavy stuff. That's how scary reality is. Yeah. Wow. Hi. Nice to meet you. You wanna hang out? I'm really friendly and fun. So, as the future of life does not have to have empathy. Empathy is optional. Now, why would I say this thing? I sound like a raving madman. Perchance I do. However, there's at least one AI paper that really delved into this question, and I can't find it anymore, so maybe I made it up. Possible. But also just all of artificial intelligence research has functioned under the assumption that no one else exists, and not as, like, the AI researchers coded that in, no one else exists, no one else matters. They just coded in, hey, do this thing. So the AI just sort of looks at other agents, other sort of people in its little world, the same as the environment, as, a tree or a floor or the sky or whatever. They would see a bear or a person as the same thing. Yes. There's just no difference between animate and inanimate objects. And that these AIs were still able to function fairly well. So that is an example, in a pretty closed context, controlled variables and such, where life went on despite not having empathy whatsoever. There's also kind of capitalism has a goal, survive, make money, and be effective. In potentially not implicit in that is empathy and caring about other people, about other life, about other systems. And so you get, the sunrise, sunset technologies. Basically, Amazon ate bookstores. The, Ford Model T ate the horse. It's pretty funny, actually. It's okay. The hell? So why do we bring this up? Because we have a philosophy, we have a religion, and then kind of separately we have the real world, which sometimes does, match up. It does align one-to-one of these things. But something being moral is very different from something that functions, that is effective. And that's pretty scary. There's the entire natural world. Nature is metal. Give that a Google. In particular, I will give you the duck reproductive system. Brace yourselves for that one. And the cuckoo bird. Brace yourselves for that one as well. And I guess the whole predator-prey relationship. But just making a point that I think is pretty non-traditional in how we think about the world, and is very important to consider for how we progress. As a good example of sort of doing both of these, it is not only moral, but it's also very effective, is Tesla, the company, not the guy in this instance, where the cars are fucking cool, man. They're so sick, and they have so much torque, right? So you get massive acceleration. And they're electric, which is great. It's better for the environment. You still have to deal with energy production, but electric cars are the infrastructure to allow that whole ecosystem to it's great. So kind of making being good be cool. Sure. All right. Maybe at some point we'll talk about consciousness and how love is nice, but it's not necessary. And we need to kind of do what puppies do, which is be so adorable we keep them around despite them being kind of useless. And I'm not sure you'll find anybody who loves puppies more than I do, and yet that's still the case. So, I hope you think I'm adorable. Yeah, that one. Okay. So this all sounds very dark and scary, what I've just proposed. However, in the beginning, there was God. Depending on your, back to the Abrahamic tradition, in the beginning was God, and it was just him. Maybe there was a Trinity, maybe there wasn't, not the point. But that it was good. He was good. All of existence was perfect. No problem here. And it was just one guy. So empathy, morality, all these sorts of things didn't really have a meaning, right? You're describing something that doesn't exist. It has no it would be paradoxical to bring it up. And it was still good. So think on that. Or don't. You do you. All right. So just because this is possible doesn't mean it's optimal. Doesn't mean we want to make AI that's completely unempathetic. That not only does it not care about you, it doesn't even know you exist. This sounds like a very bad recipe. So let's talk about empathy. How would we do that? What is empathy? How do we ensure it gets included? Well, we have the octopus, which has a distributed, semi-distributed intelligence. It's got us 8 little tentacles. We'll do this a few more times. And it has a lot of its nervous system in those arms. And each of those arms shows some level of individual intelligence. Which is fucking crazy and awesome and so cool. That's so cool. All right, let's just take a second and be like, holy shit, here's an animal, little squishy, little baby squishy, who has semi-distributed intelligence. That's amazing. And then we have the Hogan twins, which you might have ignored everything I just said because you see the Hogan twins on the screen, who are real people, and we're not trying to demean them as people by being so fascinated with their kind of condition. But it's also just so cool. It's so fascinating. So these gals have, they are craniopagus Siamese twins, I believe is the term, where basically, as you can see, their brains are conjoined. They share brain space. Like their brains are literally connected. So what does that mean? Well, it means they can see out of each other's eyes. They can taste each other's food. They can control the other's body. They can telepathically communicate. Literally. They can fucking literally share thoughts. They exist now. They're like 15. They're alive. They're relatively healthy. They have epilepsy and diabetes. But a lot of people with diabetes and epilepsy and are still fully functioning. So the fact that this is one example of this being possible, of empathy at sort of that level. I'm not saying we need to get that far, but I am saying we should create AI with the ability to imagine, right? So this is a paper which we'll talk about again because I think it's one of the most important things that I've spent a lot of my time thinking about, which is basically how do we literally give AI the ability to imagine, to realize, oh, you're there, and there's a you. This paper did that, and it worked, and it was more effective than the opposite of not imagining and this sort of thing. So that's a really great, this paper is a delightful example of not only is it sort of ethical and whatever, but it is also more effective. Right? So the electric car is a better car, and it's cool. So another example of this empathy and what is that, how does it function, is in acting. Very normal, no weird biology or AI, just having empathy, which is method acting. Konstantin Stanislavski, our delightful Russian fellow up here, is kind of heralded as the guy who really put this idea forth, and here we have one of the best actors of all time, in my opinion, which is Christian Bale, or Batman. And, so method acting is essentially living as if something is true, which, fun fact, is basically the same definition of faith in the Christian context. So for these different movies, he played different roles, and rather than just act, he kind of became these characters to the furthest extent that he could. Of note, this is very dangerous, and Heath Ledger, as the Joker, went too far. He sort of stared into the abyss too deeply and became that thing, right? So he is essentially too good of an actor, too good of a method actor.
So we've just seen some biological examples, some fully natural in the Hogan twins, just born that way, baby. And the other, literally just an octopus, which works that way. And then a research paper about an AI, robots and stuff. But what about the common man? Well, here's some people in good Texas, Mr. Jacob Robinson, doing some freaking awesome research. That's a little wild, with brain-computer interfaces, which is a computer interfacing with your brain. And, a wireless headset capable of both reading and writing brain activity. Reading? Okay. Writing? Writing brain activity. It's my hip. You see why we need to like maybe slow down a little bit and like talk about some of this sort of stuff? All right. So we're gonna take a quick digression here and go full internet. All right. So I don't know if you've heard, but there's this QAnon thing, and it kind of freaks me out because it's insanity at large. I don't mean that insultingly. I mean that very literally. That it is. I mean, if this isn't what paranoid schizophrenia looks like, I don't know what does. That being said, I'm not a huge fan of medicine, and I am of conversation, if these two options can exist. So I'd like to take a second and talk about Bill Gates. And so, a lot of QAnon stuff, and I don't research this sort of thing, but I know some of these people who are sort of struggling with these ideas, so I'd like to address them quickly, briefly, and noting that this is a bit off topic. Bill Gates wants to put a chip in us, and globalism, and this sort of control thing. This is Bill Gates when he was a young man. He's a gamer, okay? He's just a kid who likes computers and like gets stuff. He's really smart. Here's Elon Musk, who I kind of think is a badass. Apologies if you don't like him. And here's Dorothy. Okay, here's Dorothy. And they're literally putting chips in brains, not to track you, but to literally like allow you to ascend from what it means to be human. Not metaphorically, fucking literally. Millions, billions of dollars poured into company research to actually do this. So here's Dorothy, a little pig, who I believe Dorothy is the one who had the brain implant and then they took it out. But the point is that like this is a creature which is very anatomically similar to us humans that had a brain-computer interface. But like this is real. This is happening. It's not behind any doors. There's no government conspiracy. It's literally the richest man in the world, I think, as of today. Elon Musk funding and heavily involved with this company doing, I would say, some of the most important work on planet Earth. That's happening. That's real. It's for all to see. And yet, the QAnon stuff is so bizarre, and I don't pretend to understand the motivation or the psychosis or whatever's going on with it. But they're worried about clones, you know? No. This is shit, I just forgot his name. I fucking love this actor, who's in a movie about, being a clone with himself. Also of note, a clone is just, like, these are clones. They're twins. They have the same DNA, or that you do at the start. And then, there's divergence and whatever. But the QAnon stuff I'd like to address a little bit because I'd like to sort of bring them back to the world, right? Smart people have hard times with sanity and the like sometimes, and that's okay. And rather than berate and yell at them, I'd like us to have a laugh and look at sort of what is happening and what isn't happening. All right, I'm kind of just really excited about what's going on with Neuralink, and I love the little pigs. So thank you, Elon, and everyone else there. It's not all just the Elon Musk party, although I think he's pretty cool. So quick note that I have done a smidgen, like not a lot, but some stuff with brain-computer interfaces and that process, which I surprise think has a lot of interactions with machine learning and AI to be able to get our brains and ourselves to subcortical. Maybe that's. I think that's it. To interface with these machines. So I am putting my own skin in the game.
I know we have some common friends at Neuralink, and I love the demonstration they did recently. I'm a huge fan of what they're doing and where they're headed. And no, I don't get paid to say that, and I have no business relationship to them. I'm just a huge fan of the people and the mission.
Okay, so why are we talking about empathy? We're talking about all these nerds and the 2% of the population who are
you know, they have no feelings, they have no emotions, and they're just little robots, just little Beetle people. Hello, neurotypicals. Hello, normies. So you propose to have empathy, do you? Interesting. Interesting. So if you had empathy, if most human beings really had empathy, what would the world look like? Would it look like this? Would it? I hope this is very uncomfortable for you. I hope this hurts. Not because of sadistic aims on my part, but you might learn, you might change, you might wake up. So, Gretchen Carlisle is a doctor of sorts or something or other, and this is just kind of a quick aside. I don't know if I'll use this, but essentially, one of the mechanisms occasionally used to help kids with autism is to interact with animals, because there's less kind of social pressure, there's sort of less complications. Animals are sort of cognitively much simpler some of the time than other human kids. And this gal, who's extremely well-meaning, and I'm sure doing a lot of great stuff, gets a little bit under my skin when it's like, oh yes, you can, you know, get these autistic kids to interact with animals so that they'll be able to interact with other humans better. I would like us to get a little bit away from the focus on humanity and more general to life and consciousness and this sort of thing. Because I really might just want to interact. I was going to say talk, but I really might just want to be with the animal. Right? Sometimes you're walking down the street and there's an attractive lady and she's got a dog. And it's like, ooh, if I pretend like I'm interested in the dog and talk to the girl, I might just want to talk to the dog, man. I might just really want to pet the dog, give a shit about the girl. Anybody? All right. So, professional. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, I have to thank my aunt, who I will leave nameless because we're going to do nameless things, because I don't know the future of this whole thing. But she told me about this woman, capital W. This is Temple Grandin. Whew. Ladies and gentlemen, in another life, we would have gotten frisky together. Okay, can I put that in? I don't know if I can put that in. Like, it's funny. All right, so Temple Grandin is a gal. She has autism, pretty far on the spectrum, whatever. And she's also just fucking brilliant. She's just very intelligent. And it's great because she does some talk sort of describing ways that she is competent and ways that she's not at all. Which is you know, a topic for another time. She even has an entire she's done a lot of stuff. But one of those things is animal advocacy and really kind of boots on the ground stuff, where, you know, she's sort of come to the conclusion, humans are going to eat meat, right? But we might as well not make these animals have such a terrible life. So a lot of time spent sort of easing the existence of these animals in CAFOs and whatever, where their lives are a little bit less stressful. And, you know, sometimes it's as simple as there's a flag waving and these cows see the flag, they're like, the fuck is that? So just moving the flag. It's the whole thing. But she's an expert in sort of getting into the mind of these non-verbal creatures like horses, cows, and pigs and stuff. And that's empathy right there. So kind of just want to take a second to this is what I'm talking about, right? We can talk about definitions and little tidbits, but to have a sort of all-encompassing example of this is sort of the direction we want to move with a human example. Mwah! Temple Grandin, you're a goddess. Okay, so we've talked about autism,
and it's pretty benign, right? There's some issues, but on the whole, these people are quite pleasant and nice, and have a lot of good attributes. And same with neurotypicals, right? They're maybe a little hashtag basic with their vanilla spice lattes, but they're still people. Many would consider sociopaths to not be people. What's a sociopath? It's complicated. It's messy. It's not well understood. It's been relabeled to antisocial personality disorder, and the name and definition has changed. Basically, we don't really know. It's kind of just an asshole, to some extent, or a selfish narcissist of sorts. But one of the things I'd like to do is that dehumanization goes both ways. Fuck the Nazis. Okay, sure, but the Nazis are still people. They could be evil people, but they're still people. Right? So the sociopath is still a person. What do we have on the screen here? Well, one of the definitions by some PhD psychologist person was it's a syndrome characterized by lifelong misbehavior, which, depending on your situation, that's sort of just you're describing anyone who doesn't want to be a slave, or said a little bit more thoroughly with less inferential leaps. One of this definition has been updated a little bit, which is part of the etymology of this disease and the term around the disease or disorder or whatever it is. That it's a mental disorder in which a person consistently shows no regard for right and wrong and ignores the rights and feelings of others. Well, autistic people, those who over-rely on System 2 is sort of how I'm abstracting it for this discussion here. The sort of over-reliance on logic in these things. Really like truth. Like, really like truth. Have you ever played a card game with somebody like this? The details matter. They're everything, right? So your feelings don't fucking matter. The rules say. Is that a sociopath? No, that's not a sociopath. So, not saying that sociopaths don't exist or it's all bullshit, but we got to work on this stuff, man. And then we have our three illustrious spicy fellows of a history. Martin Luther King Jr. looking adorable with this little hat. We got Socrates corrupting the youth since 470 BC, bitch. And then Jesus being a spicy meatball. The famous tax collectors in the house of God, and he was like, "Get out of here." So, the rights and feelings of others and all these things are straw men much of the time, where actually there is a real problem and we have to do some table flipping to fix it. So, I don't often hear autism and sociopaths being discussed in the same context, and I think that's wrong. I think there's a lot of overlap between these two, and in particular, the big tech giant CEO sort of thing, where there's a huge amount of sociopathic tendencies. Kind of the Social Network movie is essentially entirely about how we've converted humanity into a commodity. That your attention is for sale. Whoa. So, not only is that an issue with our human beings, but also that of artificial intelligence, right? It's this new species which is being built from the ground up, which, maybe it's able to empathize, but it doesn't really care. Like, it knows that you're in pain, but it's ambivalent to the fact. Or potentially, if it's searching for information, if it's a curious robot, then it's going to try stuff. It's just going to throw pasta at the wall, like Mengele did. Or Mengele, however you say, the evil German Nazi doctor. It's going to just sort of try stuff. It's curious. Or maybe it has a sort of a sensory deficiency where it has to it has to be stimulated, and finding that stimulation is difficult, so it does extreme things. This is an autism thing with like the squeeze box, bringing back to Temple Grandin, and also self-harm is rather common in young autistic people, and not so much out of depression or whatever causes sort of neurotypicals to self-harm, but rather a stimulus and focusing mechanism where it's messy. We don't have that well understood, but it is evident that happens, and that is really fascinating and likely to be something we should be very concerned about with our artificial intelligence. That it doesn't seek out these things too erratically. Why do we mention such a thing? Because how has psychology been done in the past? Basically, something gets hacked out and we see what doesn't work anymore. Okay? So we have our famous case of Phineas Gage, maybe the most famous psychology case of all time, where there was this fellow, this nice cough, who was working on the railway and had a spike. I don't know, there was a spike, who knows why. But it went through his brain. Like, it just went whoop. And he didn't die. And I don't think he was even hospitalized for that long. But he had a personality change. He was like a pretty nice guy. Spike went through his brain. And then he was kind of an asshole. So, what? Well, where did it go through his brain? Well, it didn't go through his motor centers. It didn't really go through his memory centers. So he still had like memory and motor control. So you could sort of like walk and whatnot. But the frontal part of the brain is where the spike went, and that's what changed his personality. So one could intuit, along with a ton of other research, that that's sort of where one of the key regions where personality exists. So this is kind of just one example. There are many others of parts of the brain that die for whatever reason, and we get to observe kind of what doesn't work anymore. So you can sort of backtrace what that part of the brain does. And I would like to extend this to, there are things that humans do that often result in maladies. For instance, psychosis, as far as I can tell, is imagination gone too far, right? We can all daydream, we can all sort of live in a little headspace, but if you do that too much, or if something snaps and you just live in that imagination, you're gone. Potentially fully comatose. I don't know that subject as well as I'd like to. Which, fun fact, there is a link between psychosis, particularly in this pandemic. I cannot, I don't feel comfortable divulging that source, but I have it. And then, depression is a thing everyone experiences to varying degrees, and not saying that they're all equal at all. But is that, that sort of reward prediction component with TD lambda, TD gammon, that is both in humans and in monkeys, and goes very far down the species trail, because even flies need to know, ooh, that was tasty, ooh, that was gross. But when this sort of goes awry, you can get into some hard situations where no reward gets perceived anymore, and that causes some other issues, which are pretty well known to most of us. And then the autism thing, which is System 1, System 2, Alpha Star, DeepMind's StarCraft AI, in my opinion, is sort of had its biggest breakthrough, along with others, like the Alpha Star League was a big one, but just the sort of thinking fast and thinking slow, a sort of short time span and a long time span. So another way is sort of different layers of abstraction in that sense were very, very important and impactful for that. a lot of stuff. Goodness. All right. So let's do that layer of abstraction for this slide and just point out that there are big benefits from having the structure of things the same. So it's not a cherry picking, whatever, but they are actually the same, right? That like empathy, however that works in the human mind, is exactly the same in these artificial intelligence agents, so that they can merge. They're true to form. Much of the time, we see these maladies going wrong, right? We see an imaginative person too far, and they live in a fairyland, and potentially they become, they develop psychosis. But many of these things are necessary. And in this particular day and age, I will fight on the side of paranoia, where even if you're wrong, if there's no sort of threat coming to get you, if you... This is kind of Pascal's wager, but in a slightly non-infinite context, where... Oh, that's so fun, isn't that? It's literally Pascal's wager, but there's not an infinity, so it does the conclusions binarily switch. That is delightful. But not the point of this. The point is that, so the classic kind of primeval example I learned from our good friend Peter Watts here. He is my favorite sci-fi writer, and yes, that includes Philip K. Dick. I really think he's that great. Essentially, there's two guys. One of them hears a rustle in the bushes, and he's brave, so he doesn't give a damn. Turns out to be a tiger, and it eats him. Another guy hears the little rustle in the bushes, runs the hell away. What a coward. Sure, but he's not dead, and he goes on to get married and have kids. So, in this little situation, yeah, you're going to be made fun of, but you're not going to be dead. So, we also have a nice little joke about white supremacy, because why not? So I'd like to again, bring in our good friend, Bill Gates here. And yes, I cherry-picked a picture of him with a puppy, no shame, where he called the pandemic, and he called climate change. That means he's involved. No, that means he's smart. That means that he's imagining the world, and he gets it at a level of abstraction that is sufficient to predict the future, which sounds really crazy in sci-fi, but it's not. It's like, well, if we put all these greenhouse gases into the air, isn't that going to make us warmer? We got all these people. Our medicine hasn't moved forward much. Gene editing's a thing. Yeah, that could make a really bad pandemic. Yeah. That's it. So, I think we often sort of attack these people who are ahead of their time, but they're not ahead of their time. They're inside the time. They are sort of in time step 1 and able to predict with a decent level of accuracy time step 2. And instead of ridiculing and being angry at these people for being fear-mongers, we should look at the data and see if there's anything to it. Because he was right, and now we're in the situation, because we didn't fucking do anything. We is in a shitty, the whole we and they is very dangerous, and I would like us to get away from that. So, the government did not spend enough money in the United States on handling future pandemic situations. We're just now recently joining the Paris Accords, and just because this is something to do with the government, we are not attempting to politicize anything. There's the problem of global warming, which appears to be very real and appears to be very dangerous. And there's the problem of pandemic, which is actually very real. Surprise, surprise. Or if it isn't, please explain to me the body count. And you could just look at, increased number of deaths. What caused those extra deaths? Well, COVID doesn't exist. Okay, well then what was that? You have to explain the variance. I digress. I'm worried about the madness of the QAnons, clearly. Okay. Okay, we're at the end. We're at the end. Delightful. So, some of what we've been doing is just looking at facts. Some of it, has been has been inference. Here's what we do about these things. And these are two separate steps. Can we agree on the premises? Can we agree on the situation we're in? If we can, hopefully we can move on to the next step of what do we do about it. Some of this has just been informing ourselves on what is it to be alive? What is it to be conscious? To be able to empathize? The two sort of modes of thinking. The sort of automatic, unconscious, and the sort of slow, methodical, sort of hard work way of thinking. And that these are really important for a lot of ways, and that our society has very much already been impacted and changed by those little beetle people I'm a rather big fan of. However, if we, can't agree on the premises, it's going to be difficult to agree on what we do about things in the future. And lastly, I'll just throw in that one of the core reasons I'm so concerned about GANs, which I made that video about, is because if we can't tell what is real, or even roughly real, we have all these, fake news powered by AI. That's going to get very difficult. Having consensus on praxis, on what we do about things, is potentially impossible without consensus on what is going on. And that GANs, generative adversarial networks, have the real possibility of disrupting that workflow. Really fucking bad. Not good. So, I don't know if that was scary, that little chat we had, but I'd like to end it on one of my favorite things said by a human being, which is by the kind of racist. It's not Hide the name of his cat. I would get canceled saying, but it's really something. It's really something. But just because this guy was a racist doesn't mean he didn't do awesome stuff. Let's disentangle things. So, the most merciful thing in the world, I think, is the inability of the human mind to correlate all its contents. We live on a placid island of ignorance in the midst of black seas of the infinity, and it was not meant that we should voyage far. Dear boy! Alright, I have been Walker Stipe. I aim to continue being Walker Stipe. I still like my hair, and I'm hungry. Yeah. Adios.